Welcome to Learning Aloud, a podcast from the Organizational Dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania, produced to inspire purposeful leadership practice and transform organizational experience. I am your host, Stephen G. Hart. It's always a great pleasure for me to feature students, alums, and faculty from the Organizational Dynamics program at Penn who have done extraordinary work and made a difference in the world. It's even better when that person is also a personal friend. Aronda Smith-Benson lived in Philadelphia for 20 years before returning home to her native Louisiana to start her new business. She's an experienced personal development coach, business owner, author, consultant, speaker, and a veteran subject matter expert. Aronda is an honorably discharged Army veteran, having deployed during Desert Shield and Desert Storm as a medic with the 3rd Armored Division 45th Support Battalion. Aronda's unit received the Valorous Unit Award, equivalent to the Silver Star, which is the second highest decoration which may be bestowed upon a U.S. Army unit. Aronda is the first female and the youngest person to serve as a member of the City Council Veterans Advisory Commission of Philadelphia. She's a recipient of the Philadelphia Business Journal Veteran of Influence Award, Women Veteran Rock Leaders and Legends Award, Point Breeze Association Veteran Advocacy Award, Spectrum Health Services Community Gem Award, and the Women Veterans Leadership Award. She has also had the distinguished honor to moderate a panel at the Women Veterans Employment Symposium in Washington, D.C., sponsored by Red Book magazine and former First Lady Michelle Obama. She founded the nonprofit Women Veterans Command Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The center was dedicated to providing opportunities for women veterans to explore and define their life purpose. The Women Veterans Command Center provided strength-based initiatives to empower, educate, and enrich the lives of women veterans throughout their lifespan by utilizing the appreciative inquiry coaching model. In early 2022, Aronda published her first book, Appreciative Inquiry, a strength-based approach to enhance the lives of women veterans, which was the basis for her capstone project on the Organizational Dynamics program at Penn. Aronda stopped by our virtual studio recently to talk about her service in the military, her studies at Penn, and how she is now using her work to improve the lives of women veterans. Aronda, good afternoon. It's great to see you after a long time away, and it's such a pleasure for me to have you on the show today to talk about your wonderful new book, Appreciative Inquiry, a strength-based coaching approach to enhance the lives of women veterans. Why don't you just introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about your military service?
Hello, everyone. My name is Aronda Smith-Benson, and I'm a United States Army veteran. I went into the military, I think around the age of 19 years old. I went to college one year after high school. I went to the University of New Orleans, and I decided to leave and go join the military. I enlisted for 2 years, and around that time, Desert Storm, Operation Desert Shield happened. So I ended up getting deployed. So I was then extended for additional 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months or so. And I was deployed during Desert Storm as a medic. As a medic of 3rd Armored Division. So what we did, we supported field artillery, cavalry, and infantry.
So you had a firsthand experience, obviously, of combat situations, and maybe particularly the issues or concerns that women veterans might experience in the military.
Well, certainly in the 3rd Armored Division, women were definitely small in number, very small in number. I can't remember the exact statistic at the moment, but very small in number. Those MOSs or jobs in the military are male dominated, even to this day. So there was a small amount of us that served in terms of medical and supply and some other support services, administrative services as well. So with that comes its own challenges, being the few, women that are serving. Catcalling. I mean, what we call in the military is military sexual trauma, is what is commonly referred to. So it ranges from sexual harassment, to forcible rape. That doesn't happen to every woman in the military, but those are some of the things that can happen, of course, while you're serving, in those.
So based upon your experience, this obviously became something of keen interest to you to follow through on, particularly in your graduate work when you left the military. How did you make that transition after your time in the military, and why did you focus on this particular study?
As for me, returning home, during that time, there wasn't a whole lot of support when you return home. Now, I mean, I commend the VA. Now there's a tremendous amount of support for folks returning home from deployment. But back then, that was in 1991, just to give you guys a time period. So that was down in 1991. So it wasn't a ton of support. So returning home, I had my challenges in terms of, maintaining stable employment. I felt like a fish out of water. Felt like I wasn't understood, coming directly from combat. And then I was back home at my home of record is what they call, what it's called. So just meaning that I returned back to the place I resided after my service. So I was back in a little town called Homer, Louisiana, where I was born and raised, and I was living with my mom. So just strained, friendships and relationships, and just a lot of clutter at the time, just a lot of things and that I wasn't able to focus on. And then later on, I come to know that I was, diagnosed with PTSD, of course, PTSD and anxiety and mood disorder, as a result of my service, in Desert Storm.
And how did the PTSD manifest itself for you?
For me, it was primarily, I was angry a lot. Not only angry, I was always anxious. I was always anxious. So, again, that story you may hear oftentimes from other service member, you can't sit with your back to the door. You have to see all of the exits. And also drinking, although I was very productive and I tended to, when I got on a job, I actually did well. But for me, the drinking, became an issue for me as well. And again, just having stable, relationships, primarily intimate relationships. I wouldn't stay in relationship long period of time, but mainly just a lot of just angry and just unsettled, as much as I can remember.
So you eventually moved back from Louisiana up into the Philadelphia area, and you wound up at Penn. How did that transition occur for you?
So what happened after being home for some time? So in Homer, Louisiana, the primary industry in terms of employment centers around the oil field industry and industries that support it, healthcare industry, teachers and educators. So for me, there wasn't any interest in any of those areas. So I had a record label here in Homer, Louisiana, and the digital age came about, and it was pretty tough to make money. People started to go online, and there's all these, programs that you could purchase, and everybody and anyone can be a producer or management, because you can get management templates, so on and so forth. So it just changed the dynamics of the industry. So I was no longer able to make money in that industry. So at that time, I felt like the best thing for me to do is relocate. And then one of the gentlemen that was on my record label, his mom lived in Philadelphia at the time. And she was like, if you're ever interested in moving to Philadelphia, let me know. I'll take you in. And sure. So that's what I did. I moved up to Philadelphia. And that's how I got to Philadelphia, basically, just to change in industry in terms of work and employment and what that looked like for me.
And we were fortunate enough to get you at the University of Pennsylvania. So how did that transition occur for you?
So this is a story about UPenn, right? So I had a colleague of mine that graduated from the program, the very same program. And then she and I were on a conversation on the phone, like we were on the phone having a conversation. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I got to get to bed. I need to study I have taken the LSAT in the morning. So my goal was to go to law school. She's like, "Law school?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've been wanting to go for some time." And I said, "The LSAT is in the morning. You know, I've did the LSAT prep and I think I'm ready this time." So she was like, "Well, I'm going to email you this program and I want you to take a look at it." And she said, "And give me your thoughts." So we got off the phone and I took a look at the program and I was like, wow, I think that's a better fit, because I started to look at my track record in terms of previous employment, my passions, and some of the things I had done already. And certainly the OD program was a better fit. So that's how I ended up in the program.
And when you first saw that, did you see a connection with your military experience and what you observed about women being a connector to what you might study in the future, or even the pathway to your book? Or was it still very much open at that point?
At that point, it was pretty much open. I think what attracted me to the program was the focus on organization. And then for me, you know, I was able to kind of hone in more on people and organization, obviously. So that was the main attraction for me was the people, and how people, organizational change, organizational culture, and all those things. And then later on, there was an interest in coaching, but initially that wasn't an interest at all. It was just about people and organization. So that's what really drew me to OD. And I looked at some of the courses. There was a course in storytelling and one in organizational politics and those sort of things. So it kind of piqued my interest. Like I saw myself, you know, in those classrooms, and then being able later to practice some of those things that I would learn in the program.
And did you find, as you thought about that your military experience kept coming up and up in these things like storytelling and the people side of things? Did you see a connection there at all?
I did. What I saw was that in OD, the way that it's presented, the way storytelling is it's actually storytelling in organizations, of course, is how, you know, during your service in the military, that's something that is, I don't want to say restricted, but storytelling as the way that it's introduced in organizations, it focuses on how this building a story for your customers, your clients. It's a connection. It's a way to build a connection, you know, for your products and your services and so on. In the military, the story is already told about the tradition of the military, not the military itself and your specific branch of service. So it was a little different in that way, that how you express your stories in civilian organizations, you have just a little bit more leeway in what that looks like and how you can tell it. If that makes sense. So,
but it also sounded like perhaps it touched a couple of nerves, or perhaps tapped into some emotions for you as you recounted your stories and your military service.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I know I'm saying this, Dr. Greco with storytelling. So, you know, one of the things that I was able to get a lot of clarity around. So although it was basically storytelling organization, there were opportunities to in assignments to also participate and speak about your specific story. So there may be a specific topic or a certain emotion and things like that. So certainly some of me, I was able to bring forth in the class, you know, and share, you know, also. And I realized that my story was a little bit different than some of my colleagues in the classroom, because mine had come from, a lot of my story had come from some of my military service and how I expressed those things.
It's almost like it came up unconsciously for you in the beginning. You really didn't intend to, but it sort of just bubbled up.
Yes.
So you took a concentration around coaching, I believe, in your degree work, and that led you, I think, to some interesting discoveries in terms of looking at research around this topic and what works practically for people, and then the focus on particularly women and the experience of women veterans who are coming out of military and transitioning into civilian life. and you wanted to really find out what exists in terms of research and approaches that was specific to their experience. And I think you found it rather shallow.
Right. So you know what I realized, Steve, again. So I ended up, there was a coaching course that was offered. I'm not sure if it was Amrita or Linda Pennington that taught the course. So I was like, let me give it a shot. I'll take a coaching course, right? And then once I took the first course, I got sucked in, and so I ended up getting a certification in organizational coaching. But one of the things that I was really attracted to coaching, it was all about the question. You know, it was just all about the question that the answer resides in the individual. Again, in the military, you don't have the emphasis is not on asking us questions. Most of the time is about giving directives. So it was quite different, in that way. During the time I was in the program at Penn, was also a director of a women's Veterans Command Center. It was a nonprofit that I founded. So it was the second nonprofit that I founded. The first one was based solely on providing supportive services. So it was more deficit based. And, there was a part of me, after doing some research and doing some reading and learning a lot more about coaching, I'm saying, hey, we all have some real innate abilities and strengths that rest, within us, not how to access that. We'll have to figure that out, but accessing it was all about the question as well. And some other work, of course. So that's how I kind of got the motivation to look at, women veterans and offer something more strength-based approach, which was the coaching for the second nonprofit. And that book is based on that research. So I went to the program director and I said, I think I want to do, my research on my specific nonprofit and how we use the coaching model.
And you used what I would call an appreciative inquiry approach to that, right? So tell us a little bit about the difference between what you recognized as were traditional approaches and versus how AI approaches that.
Yeah, so AI was developed by, David Cooperrider, I believe, in the 1980s, primarily for organizations. So it was a strength-based approach for organizations to look at, what they do well, to boost their innovation, and again, maybe shift organizational culture and all, but doing so by using a more strength-based approach. And then appreciative coaching is primarily the same thing. It's just looking at what an individual has, looking at what they do well, looking at their strengths. And because AI focuses on what the whole focus of AI is stating that what we focus on is what we become. So if we focus on more of our deficits and problems, that's who we can become. And that's what our future state may look like. But AI certainly looks at more of a strength-based approach. And
yeah, you do a nice job in your book of comparing what I call the sort of the problem-centered approach versus the strengths approach. And it's a really important distinction, isn't it? Because it really sets off a different mindset of the way that you approach the remedy to what is in front of you as a challenge. And, the problem-centered approach seems to think it's fixing things, whereas the appreciative inquiry approach is starting with what is already present within you that has the potential to grow.
Right, exactly. And then what I learned too from doing the research, people like talking about their successes. You really they love and enjoy talking about their successes. So, in that in itself, it starts to boost their self-confidence and self-awareness in a different way and in a different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And you found some, I think, alarming statistics, or maybe lack of statistics, when you dug into this issue a little further, particularly when it comes in terms of the approaches to helping women veterans. What are some of the deficiencies you found in both the literature and the statistical areas of this work?
Yeah, so certainly in the literature, it was a very small amount of literature out there on women veterans overall. And then, after I drilled down even just a little bit more, the literature out about women veterans, was not focused on, again, it wasn't focused on our strength. And there was the data that I was able to find clearly stated that women possess a lot of strength in terms of leadership abilities. I can't remember the exact data, but a large number of women veterans leave the service with at least a bachelor's degree. And a lot of other strengths, that they possess. But there's so much literature that does not, again, respond to women's veterans in our service. And then the small amount of literature I found as well definitely didn't give way or give space, to identify, again, like some of the things that we innately do well, as women and as women veterans.
So you found this huge gap in the work, in the literature. So you set about to try to fill in some of that a little bit. So tell us the way that you approach this in the writing that you did.
Yeah. So in terms of the research, there was 5 women veterans. So I was able to find women that served in Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard, which is odd. It's rare that we can find someone in the Coast Guard and definitely find a female that had served. And there were various ages, served in different eras for the most part. So what we did, I was able to get some coaches that volunteered. And part of the research was not to tell the women that we were using that specific approach, the strength-based approach in their questioning and throughout the research. So that's how the research was set up.
Did you find a lot of commonalities in their experiences?
In their experiences during their service?
Yes.
Yes. I think it was more commonalities than not.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was more commonalities than not during their respective service.
And I think you noticed that even though they weren't aware they were going through a strengths-based approach to this, they seemed to come out of it with a little more sense of optimism.
Yes. So that's one of the things we went through the research, and we applied like the 5 principles. AI has 5 principles, like the basic tenets. I guess that's the best way to explain. So it has like basic tenets, and we applied their responses to these 5 tenets. And definitely, just like you said, there was, looking at it as evidence that there was a more optimism coming out on the other side of the coaching sessions because of the type of questions that inquiry that was used, during these sessions.
Yeah, you saw not just optimism, but perhaps confidence as well, growing of the people that you worked with.
Yeah, confidence for them, and then also one of the questions that was asked, we were trying to figure out how they were received by others, like family, friends, or colleagues after their sessions, and that was also very affirmative as well. And how they were described, by maybe, and some of them may be a coworker or supervisors, and some people may be a significant other, but certainly they saw a change in them too, in a positive enthusiasm and a change in how they were perceived by other folks as well.
Now you decided to try this out at this nonprofit that you founded, and how did you teach other people who were working with you how to apply this method?
So we had I had one-on-one sessions actually with each coach because I wanted to make sure that they understood the appreciative inquiry coaching and then also understood what I was trying to do in terms of the research.
And how did they react?
They had reacted well. I think 2 of the folks were like familiar, like with strength-based coaching and positive psychology. And a couple of them, they weren't, they had used some other coaching methodologies in the past, but they were excited about it. they brought a lot to the table as well. As coaches, again, just a couple of them was not familiar with the AI coaching specifically.
So you decided to write about this as your capstone thesis for your graduate program, and ultimately this became the basis for the book. So tell us a little bit more about how you got through the writing aspects of this thing and the presenting of the evidence and the information and the research, and then how did you turn it into a book?
Amrita and Linda Pennington. Amrita was my advisor for the capstone, and then Linda Pennington was my reader. So a couple of meetings with the both of them, in terms of once I got approved to do the actual research by Alan Barstow, I met with them individually, and then we met collectively a couple times. And they gave me some feedback in terms of how to, move forward with the research and, what it may look like. And that whole process was daunting, exciting and daunting at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
Because one of the things for me is writing is so difficult, for me, that's how my trauma shows up. I can probably articulate myself pretty well, but then it comes to writing and I get stuck, for sometimes. So I had to definitely do a lot of work to get myself to get the pen to paper. But they were very helpful and instrumental and would give me small tasks, to do in between meetings that was manageable for me.
So essentially they encourage you to break it down into smaller parts and do it that way rather than take it all at once.
Yes, and exactly what we did. In fact, I still have that outline that they shared, and it was very helpful, man. And I owe a lot to them and their patience as well. And their leadership throughout the process. So.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because I think a lot of the people who join our program, it's a daunting prospect for them to get to this stage in their study, right. And it often is it's often a insurmountable for a lot of people to get through that. They need that advice about how to break it down. And the other thing that was really interesting for me was that you chose something you really cared about, something you're really passionate about, and something that you really felt that if you were able to get this done, you would add something important to the work.
Right. So I wanted to do research that definitely would make a difference. So I kind of thought about different topics here and there. But at the end of the day, I say, you know what, I want to do something that's definitely going to make a difference. And for me, my passion was women veterans. And after being introduced to AI and how I applied it into my life and how it helped me to look at myself differently, as opposed to looking at some of the deficit-based and problem-based areas that I had after returning home, from the military, specifically after being deployed. So it was one of the things that brought about change in my life, positive change in my life. So I was really big on how can I take this and capture it in a way where I can introduce it to other women veterans, but I can also introduce it to agencies out there, that I can also introduce it to coaches. I can also introduce it to the veteran administration. So it was definitely, high on my list, just to not do something, just a body of research, and get through the program, but something that I can use later on. And that's how I kind of decided to, from the research, and then publish it as a book, so I can hopefully, bring about, the body of work to different spaces, and, maybe doing some, meet the author events and having opportunities to sit down with some leadership at the VA and other organizations and things like that.
Yeah, you point out the importance of this talent that women veterans have in the workplace. And some of the advice in the book, I think, is aimed at organizational leaders who might tap into this. Can you recall some of the advice that you came to in terms of how organizations need to be more aware of the issue of women in the workplace, particularly women veterans in the workplace? And what are some of the things organizations can do to make it conducive for their growth and development?
I think if organizations are able to, in the workspace, I think there's a lot of organizations now that have initiatives, I would say, have initiatives, built in around veterans and helping with that process with veterans transitioning from the military, to the civilian workplace. There's quite a bit of, especially some of the larger corporations mainly, are doing that type of initiatives. But I think it's also key too, to make sure those initiatives are geared toward women veterans and what they can bring to organization as well.
Is it in the form of things like internal networks?
I think internal networks would be one, but I also think to look at, because it could be misleading, in some ways, that women veterans that serve. Now more than ever, we have more and more service members that are deploying, and civilians, when we share as women that we've deployed, we still get the side eye, like, really? You're on the front line. And I'm like, it's only one line. It's all the front line.
Yeah.
So I think there's still some misconceptions out there about women in their service. And I just think to take just a little bit more time, industries and organizations just kind of educate, leaderships or HRs with these organizations about what women veterans are bringing as well. Again, most of them are very qualified in terms of leadership. Most of them are non-commissioned officers or officers in the military. So they have quite a bit of leadership responsibilities, while they're serving.
And it's very often intense too, isn't it? When the military situation.
Yes, and the intensity that comes along with it. So how do you take advantage of that as an organization and benefit from that? Was mutually beneficial for the organization and the female veteran as well. A lot of attention is given to our male counterparts, when they return home. So there's still some work to be done around, women veterans and what it looks like returning home, what it looks like in organizations as well.
Yeah, you acknowledge in your book that the work you did is really just a beginning for additional study that needs to be done. What are some of the things you're advocating for down the road that either you might take on yourself or you encourage others who have an interest and a passion for this area to really dig into and study in more depth?
So I guess I'll start with the biggest area that I'd like to see where change can be effective in terms of AI coaching is the VA. I would love to see AI coaching introduced as complementary to psychotherapy, traditional psychotherapy. I share often that traditional psychotherapy within the VA was also critical for me in becoming who I am today. So it wasn't just the looking at myself through the strength-based approach, but it was also the psychotherapy at the same time going on. But I would love to see AI, it could use as a complement, at the VA hospital. And I would also love to see in terms of coaching, more coaches being introduced to AI coaching. I'm a member of International Coaching Federation. So last week, I was able to do a workshop to introduce AI coaching to 25 other coaches. Out of the 25, one person was familiar with appreciative query just in general. But none was, had heard of appreciative inquiry coaching at all. So it's definitely introducing it to more coaches, also.
Have you discovered any of the women that you've worked with as clients are attracted to doing this and becoming a coach themselves?
So I haven't had any of the ladies that participated in the research using it as a coaching and as a coaching practice, but they've certainly shared in that workplace. They've done some workshops, so to speak, not more or less as the expert in it, but they were able to share from their perspective and how AI, changed the dynamics in their life and what that looked like for them. So I was excited about it. Actually made me smile. And then some of them that are parents, they're doing it and they're using it in terms of parenting their children, especially their teenage children and young adults. So they've been using it in various ways. None of them have used it in an official capacity as coaches, but they're definitely using it in practice.
Yeah, I use it a lot in the work that I do, and I really know the power of the appreciative inquiry approach to things is very, very powerful.
Yes, it is. Just that the questions, that the questions and how we engage people.
Yeah. So since the publication of the book, tell me some of the things that have happened to you.
Yep, since the book is published, been able to do a few speaking engagements here and there. I have some meet the author events lined up, and some book signings. I'll be on the East Coast here soon. I'm doing a couple book signings there as well. I got some invites from the VA to sit down with leadership and kind of discuss the topic. So it's certainly opened up some doors, but the work is just beginning.
Well, this has been great to talk to you, and I'm really thrilled and very proud of what you've been able to accomplish with this work, Aronda. It's clearly something you have a deep passion for, and I want to thank you for taking the time to really delve into it and to study it and to provide us with, all of us who work in organizations, an understanding of the issues, concerns, and things that we need to care about to really nurture this in our organizations. It's a very important piece of research that you've done, and I just so appreciative that you brought it to our attention. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
So what I want to do, I will close out my interviews with people with a couple of questions that I ask each guest. And I'm going to do the same with you, since I know you pretty well. I know some of these answers already, but be interested to see what comes out when we discuss this on here. So I have 5 questions for you to give us a bit of insight as to who you might be. We've got a lot of background on who you were and what have you, but let's get a bit more into your mind of you. So what is one thing in your life that you have not yet done?
I haven't been hiking.
Wow.
Yeah, so I love
all that time in the military, you never hiked?
never officially hiked, no. So I love mountains. Something about mountains I just love, right? So I just have this dream of going out to the mountain range and hiking and all. But the backstory to that is that I'm really trying to get myself in shape, and ready for the hike. But that's the one thing that I haven't done that I would love to do, is go hike.
Sounds delightful. I grew up in the North Yorkshire moors. I hiked all the time, so I know the power of hiking. That's great. My second question: what does the world need right now?
I think the world needs respect for diversity of thought. The world needs to understand that we're all individual people, individual passions and missions and upbringing and all, but we need to find a place to respect diversity of thought.
Important work, isn't it? Really, as our society seems to become more divisive, the more important it is to listen to one another.
Yes.
If my third question: if you were back in school today, knowing what you know now, what do you think you would want to be when you grew up?
Probably, I would have to say maybe a monk, just somewhere that I can just do some contemplation.
Wow.
Have a reason to just, so now, as we live today, everybody has to be doing something, but I would love that something for me is just contemplation each day.
Wow, that contemplative life. How important is that?
Yes.
Yeah, really critical, isn't it? My fourth question: what hobby or activity brings you most joy?
Music. Yeah, music. I love.
What kind of music? You're from Louisiana, so I think I know the answer, but tell me.
I love different types of music. Definitely we have music here that's called Zydeco. I don't know if you're familiar.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, so Zydeco, blues, R&B, country. So I love it all. because I grew up on it all, so I grew up in a time where music was enjoyed, different artists, different variety of music. My friends and I grew up listening to just a little bit of everything. And hip hop also, I really love hip hop in terms of the poetic nature of it, most of it. If you listen to it, I really enjoy that as well. So I love music. Yeah.
You have a favorite artist?
I would have to say my favorite artist is Lauryn Hill. Lauryn Hill.
Very cool. And my last question, what person, alive or dead, has inspired you the most?
Yeah, so that definitely is that's a toss-up. So my mother, definitely.
Tell me about Mom.
Mom was very inspirational, in terms of allowing me a space to grow and to be the person I am today. She was very encouraging. She was very positive. She was very positive. If you think it and dream it, you can do it. She just possessed a lot of that in her. She was a people person. She loved people. She loved all people. And I would have to say my great uncle, he was a businessman. So even as a kid, I noticed a lot of the work that he was doing in community relationships he had, businesses that he ran and operated, and how he took care of family. Yeah, so the two of them.
So you carry forward both of those legacies in your own life?
Yes, every day.
Yeah.
And that's how, that additional motivation when I need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. I'm so glad to have had this time with you. I really appreciate it. Again, very proud of what you've accomplished here. And I'll just take this opportunity to say thank you to you personally for the wonderful contributions you've made to our nonprofit where we've worked together, the Cranley Center in Northeast Philly. Some of the things that you have done there are remarkable, and we're really going to miss you now that you're moving on to other things. But thank you for that. And thank you for being here today. It's always a pleasure to see you.
You're welcome. And thanks for you and everything you've added in my life too. I certainly appreciate you, and I appreciate my time and service, on the board. And I'm still here if you guys ever need me. But thank you as well, Steve.
Oh, we'll be in touch. Don't you worry about that.
All right. All right. Take care.
Thank you, Aronda.
You're welcome.
My guest today was Aronda Smith-Benson, MSOD, and author of Appreciative Inquiry, a strength-based approach to enhance the lives of women veterans. This has been a Learning Aloud podcast from the Organizational Dynamics community at the University of Pennsylvania. My thanks to Dan Shields for producing today's show. My name is Steve Hart.